This video is not investment advice. It is purely educational content. You wake up, grab your coffee, and pay $5.50. 3 years ago, the same coffee cost $3.80. You didn't vote for a tax hike. No politician raised your coffee tax. Yet somehow, your money buys less. This invisible force doesn't show up on your paycheck stub. It doesn't appear in government documents, and it certainly doesn't announce itself. But it's the single most powerful wealth-eroding mechanism in the modern economy, and it affects every single person who holds currency. This is inflation, or as some call it, the hidden tax that governments never officially levy, but everyone always pays. Here's what they don't teach in schools. While you're focused on your job, your taxes, and your bills, your savings are systematically diluted in real time. The average person loses roughly 2 to 3% of their purchasing power every single year just by holding money in the bank. That's not a coincidence. That's not an accident. That's a feature of the monetary system, and the people who understand it get rich while everyone else slowly gets poorer. Think of it this way. In 2010, $100,000 could buy you a decent house in many American neighborhoods. Today, that same $100,000 barely covers a down payment. If you had $100,000 sitting in a savings account earning 0.01% interest, which many people did, you didn't gain anything. You lost. You lost the ability to buy that house. You lost decades of compounding. You lost the future your money could have built. And the system doesn't care because your loss is somebody else's gain. The government prints trillions of dollars during a crisis. Banks create money out of thin air through fractional reserve lending. Companies raise prices because they can. And your salary? It stays the same for 2 years while your grocery bill climbs 15%. Then they tell you the inflation rate is transitory and under control. Under control for whom exactly? Certainly not you. Meet Marcus. He's 45 years old, works as an accountant, makes a solid $75,000 per year. For the last 20 years, he's been diligent. He saves 10% of his income every month, just like the financial advisors say. That's $7,500 per year, or $150,000 over 2 decades. He feels secure. He thinks he's prepared. But here's the problem. Inflation averaged 2.5% per year over those 20 years. His $150,000 has the purchasing power of roughly $92,000 in 1994 dollars. He saved responsibly, but his purchasing power still fell by 39%. Meanwhile, someone who borrowed money to buy real estate or stocks would have multiplied their wealth by 4 to 5 times over that same period. Marcus did everything right, and he's still losing. This is how the middle class dies. Not dramatically, not overnight, but slowly, imperceptibly, year after year, decade after decade. And the system doesn't care about Marcus because the system was never designed to protect people like him. It was designed to transfer wealth from savers to borrowers, from workers to asset owners, from the majority to the minority. Let's look at specific numbers. In January 2020, the average U.S. home cost $320,000. By January 2024, that same home cost $425,000. That's a 33% increase in 4 years. But wages? They rose about 15% over the same period. The gap is inflation, and it's eating everyone's lunch. A young couple trying to buy their first home today needs to earn significantly more than their parents did, adjusted for inflation, just to afford the same house. The game changed, and nobody told them. Their parents bought homes on single incomes. Today, dual incomes still struggle to qualify. And the beautiful part? The wealthy already own their houses. They own multiple properties. They own stocks that rose 33% in 4 years. They own businesses that raise prices. So inflation actually makes them richer in real terms. They're not just protected, they're profiting from your erosion. This isn't a conspiracy theory. This is basic math. The numbers don't lie.
Now, objection number 1. But Guy, the Federal Reserve targets 2% inflation. Isn't that good for the economy? Here's the nuance. Mild inflation can theoretically encourage spending and investment instead of hoarding cash. But here's what they don't tell you. That 2% compounds. Over 10 years, 2% inflation reduces your purchasing power by roughly 18%. Over 30 years, it's 45%. If you live to 85, you'll see roughly 70% of your purchasing power evaporate, even with healthy 2% inflation. And that assumes inflation stays at 2%, which it hasn't in the last 5 years. The other beautiful part of 2% inflation, it's low enough that most people don't notice. If it was 10%, people would riot. At 2%, people blame themselves for not making enough money. Genius. Let's look at a real grocery bill. In 2020, a family of 4 spent roughly $1,200 per month on groceries. By 2024, that same family spent $1,650 per month. That's a 37% increase in 4 years. If a parent was earning $50,000 per year in 2020, they'd need to earn $68,500 today just to maintain the same purchasing power on groceries alone. But most people aren't getting 37% raises. They're getting 2 to 3% if they're lucky. The math is brutally clear. You're losing ground every single year. And it's not just groceries. It's rent, it's utilities, it's childcare, it's transportation, it's healthcare. Every single category is rising faster than wages. And here's what really gets me. They call this low inflation now because it's not 8% anymore. They patted themselves on the back when inflation cooled to 3% last year. 3% is still destroying your wealth. But because it's lower than 8%, people feel relieved. It's psychological manipulation masquerading as economic policy. They lower your expectations so you'll accept a worse reality. Here's how this actually happens. Central banks create money by buying government bonds, essentially printing currency electronically. When they do this on a massive scale, like after 2008 or during the 2020 pandemic, they increase the money supply without increasing the goods and services in the economy. More money, same amount of stuff. Basic supply and demand. Prices go up. The value of your dollar goes down. This isn't a theory. This is accounting. This is physics applied to economics. But who benefits from this money creation? The financial institutions and wealthy individuals who get access to that new money first. They buy assets before prices rise. By the time that money trickles down to regular workers through wages, prices have already jumped. You're always playing catch-up. You're always behind. The deck is stacked before you even sit down at the table. Objection number 2, but if inflation is so bad, why do governments keep doing this? Because it's politically convenient. If a government needs to pay off debt, they can either raise taxes, which makes voters angry, or debase the currency. Currency debasement is a hidden tax that feels painless because it's invisible. Nobody sees a line item on their tax return that says inflation tax $8,000, but if they got a tax bill for $8,000, they'd riot. This way, the wealth transfer happens silently, and most people never even realize they're the ones paying. It's the perfect political solution. It's the perfect crime. No one gets arrested. No one loses an election. The mechanism is so invisible that people blame themselves. I'm not earning enough. I'm not saving enough. When really, the game is rigged from the start. The system has convinced you that your poverty is your fault, not the fault of monetary policy. That's the real genius.
Let's quantify this hidden tax across different income levels. A person earning $40,000 per year with $5,000 in savings loses roughly $125 per year to 2.5% inflation on that savings. But that same person also pays inflation on rent, groceries, utilities, and transportation. Their total inflation tax might be $4,000 to $6,000 per year when you factor in all of their costs. Meanwhile, a millionaire with a diversified portfolio of stocks, real estate, and commodities might actually gain from inflation because their assets appreciate faster than their costs rise. The tax is regressive. It hits the poor and middle class hardest. The system is designed this way on purpose. The poor pay more, the rich profit, and nobody goes to jail. The laws don't forbid it. It's legal. It's normalized. It's called economics. So, here's the critical question. What do people who understand this do about it? They don't keep money in savings accounts. They don't hold cash. They invest in assets that appreciate with inflation. Stocks, real estate, commodities, businesses. They borrow money at fixed rates to buy assets that rise in value. They understand that in an inflationary environment, debt becomes less burdensome, while cash becomes more burdensome. This is how wealth transfers happen. This is how the wealthy protect their purchasing power while everyone else slowly erodes. It's not that wealthy people are smarter, it's that they understand the game. If you have $100,000 in a savings account earning 0.5% interest while inflation is 3%, you're losing 2.5% per year. That's $2,500 gone.
But if you borrowed $100,000 at 4% fixed to buy real estate that appreciates 5% per year, you're making 1% net profit while the debt itself becomes easier to pay off in real dollars. One person is losing wealth. One person is building it. The only difference is understanding the game and having the courage to play it differently. This brings us to objection number 3. Isn't investing risky? What if the market crashes? Yes, markets can crash, but inflation never stops. It's guaranteed. You can't avoid the erosion by playing it safe. Playing it safe in an inflationary world is actually the riskiest move. You're guaranteed to lose. The wealthy understand this, so they take calculated risks. They diversify. They don't put all their eggs in one basket, but they don't keep eggs in a basket that's slowly burning down either. They accept short-term volatility to avoid long-term erosion. Here's what really happens to people who wait for the perfect time to invest or who keep everything in cash until things settle down. They never invest. They keep waiting. And 20 years later, they're 60 years old, still holding the bag on cash that's worth half of what it was when they started waiting. All that caution achieved nothing but losses. Let's tie this back to your coffee. That $5.50 coffee? It's not just inflation, it's a signal. Every price increase is a message from the market that the purchasing power of your dollar is declining. When you see prices rising everywhere, rent up 12%, tuition up 8%, healthcare up 7%, that's not a coincidence or individual business decisions. That's systemic currency debasement showing up across the entire economy. Your eyes aren't lying to you. Your money really is worth less, and it will be worth even less next year. And here's what most people miss. Understanding this gives you power. Once you see the invisible tax, you can stop pretending it doesn't exist. You can stop blaming yourself. You can start making decisions, however small, that protect your purchasing power. The first step to escaping a trap is seeing it. You're seeing it right now. Let's talk specifics. If you're earning $60,000 per year and inflation is 3%, you're effectively losing $1,800 per year in purchasing power if your salary stays flat. But if you negotiate a 4% raise instead of accepting a 2% raise, you've protected yourself and gained ground. The wealthy negotiate hard because they understand this. Average people accept whatever raise they're offered because they don't think about it in inflation terms. Small decision, massive compound effect over decades. That one conversation could be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars over your lifetime. The difference between someone who becomes wealthy and someone who stays poor isn't intelligence. It's not luck. It's understanding how inflation works and making different decisions because of that understanding. It's the difference between playing the game and not even knowing the game exists. Now, there's a deeper layer here. Inflation doesn't just affect your purchasing power. It affects how you perceive time and risk. When your money is losing value, you feel pressure to invest or spend it quickly. This creates anxiety. It makes you less rational. It makes you more vulnerable to scams, poor investment decisions, and emotional choices. The wealthy understand this psychological component too. They stay calm during inflationary periods because they're protected. Everyone else is panicking, making bad decisions, and transferring wealth upward. It's not malicious, it's just how the system works. Panic transfers wealth to the calm. This is why the top 1% have gotten richer while everyone else has treaded water. It's not that they're smarter or work harder, it's that they understand the rules of an inflationary system and play accordingly. Everyone else is playing checkers when the game is chess. And the really dark part, most people don't even know they're in a game. Here's an important nuance. Not all inflation is created equal. If inflation is driven by increased productivity and real economic growth, it's different from inflation driven by currency debasement. But in practice, most modern inflation is currency-driven, especially over the last decade. Real productivity growth has been mediocre, but the money supply has expanded dramatically. That's the kind of inflation that hurts everyone except those already holding assets. We're living through currency debasement disguised as economic growth. When economists say inflation is transitory, they mean it's not permanent in economic terms. But for your life, it's permanent. Once prices rise, they don't come back down. Your purchasing power doesn't recover. Transitory is a word that makes sense in a textbook,
but feels like a lie in the grocery store. It's technical language designed to make you feel better about getting poorer. Let's look at wage growth versus inflation over the last 50 years. From 1973 to 2023, inflation has averaged roughly 3.5% per year. Wage growth, in real terms, has averaged roughly 0.5% per year. That means, on average, workers have fallen behind inflation by 3% per year for half a century. A worker who made $30,000 in 1973 would need to make $157,000 in 2023 to have the same purchasing power. But how many workers are making $157,000? Very few. This is the silent transfer of wealth from workers to asset owners, and it's been happening systematically for decades. It's not new, it's accelerating. 50 years of systematic wealth transfer, and most people still think it's their fault. 50 years! Let's bring this back to you right now. Think about your biggest assets and liabilities. If you have a fixed-rate mortgage at 3%, inflation is actually working in your favor. You're paying back that loan with dollars that are worth less than when you borrowed them. Real wealth transfer in your direction. If you have student loans at 4%, same thing. But if your wealth is sitting in a savings account at 0.5%, or sitting in cash waiting for the right time, inflation is working against you. Every month, your purchasing power shrinks by a fraction of a percent. Over decades, that fraction becomes catastrophic. The math compounds against you or for you. There's no neutral position. The painful truth is that doing nothing is the riskiest decision, and most people are doing nothing. Inaction feels safe. Inaction feels like you're protecting yourself, but it's the opposite. Inaction is a guarantee of loss. There's one more layer to understand. Inflation affects different parts of your life at different rates. Necessities, food, housing, healthcare, tend to inflate faster than luxuries. This is why inflation hits the poor harder. A wealthy person might spend 5% of their income on food. A poor person might spend 30%. When food inflation is 15%, the rich person barely feels it. The poor person is squeezed. The system is designed to compress the middle class and lower class while protecting the upper class. The wealthy pay less in percentage terms, own the assets that appreciate, and benefit from deflated competition below them. It's not a conspiracy, it's just how the math works when you have inflation and unequal asset ownership. It's the natural outcome of the system. And understanding this, you can't unsee it. So what's the path forward? First, awareness. You now understand that this invisible tax exists. That's step one. Second, stop holding excess cash. This is controversial advice, but mathematically sound. If you have 3 months of emergency savings and a high-yield savings account at 4%, that's fine. That's a buffer. But if you have a year's salary sitting in cash earning 0.5%, you're losing money in real terms every single day. Do the math yourself and see. Third, invest in assets. This doesn't mean gambling on individual stocks or crypto. It means diversifying into low-cost index funds, real estate, or even starting a small business. The goal is to own something that appreciates with inflation rather than something that gets eroded by it. The difference between someone who retires with $500,000 and someone who retires with $2 million isn't luck. It's understanding this invisible tax and making different decisions because of it. The decision to invest instead of hoard cash. The decision to borrow to buy assets. The decision to negotiate raises based on inflation, not based on what you think you deserve. Small decisions, massive outcomes. That difference is freedom versus struggle. There's also a larger question here. Is this system sustainable? When inflation erodes the middle class and concentrates wealth at the top, what happens socially? History suggests instability. Revolutions happen when inequality becomes too extreme. But that's a longer conversation. For now, the practical reality is that the rules exist. You can't change them by complaining. You can only protect yourself by understanding them and playing accordingly. The system will do what it does. Your job is to adapt and survive. Stop waiting for the system to be fair. It's not fair, it's rigged. But now you know how it's rigged. Now you can use that knowledge to protect yourself. Now you have a choice that most people don't have. Use it. Objection number 4. What if I just work harder and earn more money? That's part of the solution, but it's not the whole solution. If you earn extra $10,000 per year, but inflation erodes $5,000 of your wealth, you're only gaining $5,000 in real terms. If you earn that same $10,000 and invest it in assets that appreciate faster than inflation, you're gaining much more. Income matters, but asset appreciation matters more. The wealthy understand this. They focus on building assets, not just earning income. Income is a tool to buy assets. It's not the end goal. Your job is to keep you focused on earning just enough to survive, not enough to build generational wealth. Understanding inflation helps you see past that trap. It helps you realize that trading time for money indefinitely is a slow death. You need assets. Let me give you a concrete example that ties everything together. Sarah is 35 years old. She earns $70,000 per year. She just got a 3% raise to $72,100. She's happy. She celebrates. But inflation is 4%. In real terms, she just took a 1% pay cut. She's actually worse off than before. She doesn't feel worse off because she's not thinking in inflation terms, but her purchasing power declined. She bought less house, less food, less future. Now, if Sarah uses that same energy to negotiate a 6% raise instead of accepting 3%, she actually gains 2% in real terms. That's the difference between falling behind and getting ahead. Most people never make that calculation. Most people never negotiate hard because they don't understand this invisible tax. Sarah could be you. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Every negotiation, every investment decision, every choice to spend or save, it all changes when you understand the invisible tax. This changes everything. So here we are. You wake up every day and pay an invisible tax that doesn't appear on any bill. You pay it through eroded purchasing power. You pay it through missed investment opportunities. You pay it by keeping your wealth in cash instead of assets. And the beautiful part? Most people don't even realize they're paying it. They blame themselves. They think they're not earning enough or not saving enough. But the math is clear. In an inflationary world, those who own assets get richer and those who hold cash get poorer. That's not a moral judgment, that's just how it works. It's physics. The choice is yours. You can keep doing what you're doing, watching your purchasing power slowly disappear and hoping things get better, or you can understand the game and start playing it. The choice is yours, but the cost of not choosing is the same for everyone. Remember, this is not investment advice, just educational content. Now, let's keep going. If this video resonated with you, please subscribe. The people who understand these invisible mechanisms are the ones who build real wealth. We cover topics like this every week, the hidden systems that affect your money, your time, and your future. We break down the financial games that shape your life so you can play smarter. The next video is going to dive even deeper into how debt becomes a wealth-building tool in an inflationary environment. If you want to understand that, if you want to learn how the wealthy use leverage and fixed-rate debt to multiply their assets, hit subscribe now and turn on notifications so you don't miss it. And if you know someone who's struggling financially and thinks it's because they're not working hard enough, share this video with them. Help them understand that the game is bigger than individual effort. The system matters, and understanding the system is the first step to winning it. Thanks for watching. You've just taken the first step towards financial awareness. What you do next is up to you.